Welcome back, and let your body grow heavy and warm wherever you are resting now. Let your breathing slow, all on its own, and imagine drifting gently outward from this quiet room, past the roof and the clouds and the cold, clear air, out across the long, patient dark, until a great ringed world rises slowly before you, and beside it, a small orange moon wrapped in soft golden haze. Its name is Titan, and beneath that haze there is rain falling tonight, and rivers running, and black seas lying perfectly still beneath an amber sky. It is the only other place we have ever found where such things happen. There is nothing you need to do now, and nowhere at all you need to be. Just breathe, and let go, and welcome back to Beyond the Stars. The first fact is that Titan is a moon of Saturn, the largest of all its moons, and the only other world we have ever found where rain falls from the sky, where rivers run across the land, and where great dark seas lie waiting in the quiet. It is not a small companion tumbling along beside a planet. It is a world in its own right, wrapped in a thick orange air that hides its surface from every ordinary telescope we have ever pointed at it. If you could set it loose from Saturn and let it circle the sun alone, we would surely call it a planet, and a strange and lovely one at that. Tonight we are going there together, slowly and gently and with nothing at all to fear. The second fact is that Titan measures about 5,150 kilometers across, a number that means very little until you set it beside something familiar. Our own moon, the pale disk you have known your whole life, is a little more than 3,400 kilometers wide. Titan is half again as large as that, a globe so broad you could not walk around it in a lifetime of walking. It is not a rock. It is not some captured asteroid drifting in the dark. It is a full and finished world, with weather and seasons and geography, with coastlines and mountains and enormous fields of dunes, turning quietly out there tonight while you rest. The third fact is that Titan is larger than the planet Mercury, the innermost planet of our solar system. That small scorched world nearest the sun measures about 4,880 kilometers across, and Titan is comfortably wider than that. Mercury, being made of iron and stone, still outweighs it considerably, for Titan is a lighter thing built largely of ice. But in sheer size, in the width of the disk you would see hanging before you, the moon is the greater of the two. It is only an accident of history that we call one a planet and the other a satellite. One happened to circle the sun and one happened to circle Saturn. The fourth fact is that Titan is the second largest moon in the entire solar system. Out of all the hundreds we have found, only Ganymede, one of the four great moons of Jupiter, is bigger and only by a little, some 200 kilometers across the width. Those two stand well ahead of every other satellite we know of, so far ahead that no third moon comes close. But Ganymede is a bare and airless place, all ice and old stone and ancient craters beneath a black sky full of stars. Titan alone, of every moon in the solar system, has drawn a thick atmosphere around itself and managed to keep it second in size and entirely first in strangeness. The fifth fact is that Titan is an orange world, and that orange is the very first thing anyone ever notices about it. Every photograph taken in ordinary visible light shows exactly the same thing: a smooth and featureless ball the color of amber, or apricot, or weak tea held up toward a lamp. There are no markings on it, no shorelines, no clouds you can pick out by eye, nothing at all to catch the gaze. What you are seeing is not the surface, but the very top of a deep haze that wraps the whole moon evenly from pole to pole. Titan keeps its face covered, and it took us more than 3 centuries to lift that veil. The sixth fact is that Titan travels once around Saturn every 15 days and 22 hours or so, riding at a distance of about 1,200,000 kilometers from the planet. To put that in a shape you can hold, our own moon orbits the Earth at rather less than 400,000 kilometers, So Titan swings around Saturn on a circle roughly 3 times wider than the one the Moon draws around us. It is a long, slow, patient loop, a great smooth circle drawn out in the cold, and Titan has traced it faithfully, without once faltering, for something close to 4.5 billion years. The 7th fact is that Titan is what astronomers call tidally locked, which means it always shows the very same face to Saturn. Just as our Moon keeps one hemisphere turned forever toward the Earth, Titan turns exactly once on its axis for every circuit it makes around the planet. Saturn has gently combed the Moon's rotation into step with its orbit over unimaginable spans of time. So if you stood on the Saturn-facing side of Titan, the great ringed planet would hang in one fixed place in your sky, never rising and never setting, wandering only slightly back and forth across the years. A permanent presence, always there, always in the same quarter of the heavens. The 8th fact is that Titan lies very far from the Sun, out where Saturn wanders roughly 9.5 times farther from it than we are. And at that distance, sunlight arrives terribly thinned. Titan receives about 1% of the light that falls upon the Earth, and then its thick orange haze absorbs and scatters most of what little does arrive. Down at the surface, the daylight is something near 1,000th of a bright afternoon here, and yet it is not dark. It is more like the long amber gloom of a heavily overcast evening, just after the sun has gone enough to see by, and never anything brighter than that. The 9th fact is that Titan is extraordinarily cold, holding steady at about 179 degrees below zero on the Celsius scale, which is 94 degrees above absolute zero, 94 Kelvin, and only a little way above the point where the very air of Earth would gather into puddles. At such a temperature, ordinary materials stop behaving the way you expect them to. Rubber shatters, steel grows brittle, and water, the most familiar substance in all our lives, becomes as hard and unyielding as granite. That single cold number explains almost everything strange about Titan, and almost everything beautiful about it too. The 10th fact is that Titan is built, in the roughest terms, from about half rock and half water ice, mixed together in something near equal measure. Deep inside there is a core of silicate stone, warmed faintly by the slow decay of radioactive elements, and above that lie enormous thicknesses of ice, layer upon layer, pressed into strange dense forms by the weight above them. It is a world made largely of the same water you drank today, only frozen so hard, and for so long, that it has become the very bedrock of the place. Titan is, in a sense, an ocean world turned inside out and put quietly to sleep. The 11th fact is that at Titan's temperature, water ice behaves exactly the way rock behaves here on Earth. It does not melt, it does not soften, it does not slide. It cracks and fractures and forms cliffs. It can be carved by flowing liquid into valleys and canyons. It can be lifted into mountain ranges and worn slowly back down again by weather. Every stone you would kick along the ground on Titan is a lump of frozen water, and every hill you would climb is made of the same. The rock is water, and the rivers are fuel, which is perhaps the neatest summary of Titan anyone has ever managed. The 12th fact is that gravity on Titan is very gentle indeed, only about 14% of what you feel where you are resting now, which is very nearly the same pull you would feel standing on our own moon. A person who weighs 70 kilograms here would weigh less than 10 there. You could lift enormous things without effort. You could leap and hang in the air far longer than seems right, coming down slowly, almost lazily, as though the world had loosened its grip on you. Everything on Titan falls slowly and settles slowly and lands softly, which is one of many reasons the place feels less like a planet and more like a dream. The 13th fact is that Titan is very slowly drifting away from Saturn, retreating by something like 11 centimeters every year. The same patient tidal exchange that pushes our moon gradually away from the Earth is at work out there as well, and Titan is climbing outward, a hand's width each year, into a wider and wider orbit. This is a much faster retreat than anyone expected to find, and it suggests Titan may have been born far closer in than it now rides. 11 centimeters is nothing at all in a human lifetime, but given billions of years, it becomes a journey, and Titan has been quietly making it the whole while. The 14th fact is that Titan utterly dominates the family of moons circling Saturn, holding something like 96% of all the mass that orbits the planet. Saturn has well over 100 known moons, and some of them are famous and remarkable in their own right, but if you gathered every last one of them together and set them on a scale against Titan alone, Titan would outweigh the whole crowd many times over. It is not simply the biggest of Saturn's children. It is very nearly the only one that matters, gravitationally speaking, a single great world with a scattering of small pale companions keeping it distant company. The 15th fact is that Titan orbits far outside Saturn's rings, well beyond that bright and delicate structure everyone pictures when they think of the planet. The rings, for all their glory, are quite close in, a thin sheet of countless ice particles spread across a region only a few times wider than Saturn itself. Titan rides far past their outer edge, about 20 Saturn radii out, in the open dark. From Titan, the rings would be a distant detail, not a canopy overhead. And so the moon goes quietly about its business, unbothered, circling in clear and empty space, a world apart from the spectacle it belongs to. The 16th fact is that although Saturn hangs enormous in Titan's sky, nearly 6 times wider than our full moon appears to us, you would almost certainly never see it. The orange haze that covers Titan is so thick and so evenly spread that from the surface it lets almost no shape or detail through. There is no Saturn hanging in the sky, no rings, no stars, no sun as a disk. There is only a soft, glowing amber dome above you, brighter in one quarter where the sun must be, dimmer elsewhere. The most spectacular sight in the solar system is directly overhead, and it is completely, permanently hidden. The 17th fact is that a day on Titan lasts about 16 of our days, because the moon turns exactly once for each trip it makes around Saturn. So the sun, hidden as it is, creeps across that hazy sky with unimaginable slowness. Dawn is not an event on Titan. It is a long, gradual, almost imperceptible brightening that unfolds across days, the amber above you growing slowly warmer and then slowly cooler again. Nothing there is in any hurry whatsoever. If you lived on Titan, you would sleep and wake many times under one single, drawn-out, patient afternoon, a world where even the light takes its time. The 18th fact is that Titan has seasons, and each of them lasts about 7 of our years. Saturn takes nearly 30 Earth years to complete a single circuit of the Sun, and Titan, riding along with it, tilted at very nearly the same angle, experiences the same slow procession of summer and winter. So the northern lakes freeze into stillness and then slowly awaken across spans of time that would carry a human child from birth to school. Weather on Titan works on a scale we have no instinct for. A single season there outlasts most of the plans we make, and no one is in the least bit hurried by it. The 19th fact is that the orange color of Titan comes from a substance scientists have given the lovely name of tholins. The word comes from the Greek for muddy, and it describes a whole family of complex organic compounds, built in the upper atmosphere when sunlight and charged particles break apart the methane and nitrogen there and let the pieces recombine into larger and larger molecules. These molecules are sticky and reddish-brown, and they drift slowly downward through the air like a fine, endless chemical snow. The color of Titan is not paint or mineral. It is smog, of a very ancient and very patient kind, falling gently, forever. The 20th fact is that of every world we have visited, mapped, or photographed, Titan is the only one besides our own where you could stand outside and watch liquid moving across a landscape. Mars has dry channels and old floodplains, but nothing runs there now. Venus is a furnace. The moon is bone dry. Everywhere else is airless rock or crushing gas. Only Titan has clouds that gather, and rain that falls, and rivers that carry that rain down to standing seas. It is the second, and so far the last, address in the solar system with a shoreline, and tonight we are going to walk along it very slowly indeed. The 21st fact is that Titan was discovered on the 25th of March, in the year 1655, by a young Dutch astronomer named Christian Huygens. He was 26 years old that spring, working from the Netherlands with a telescope he had built with his own hands, and on that particular night he noticed a small steady point of light keeping company with Saturn. He watched it for several nights running, and saw that it moved with the planet circling it. It was the first moon of Saturn anyone had ever seen, and only the second moon ever found anywhere beyond the Earth. A single quiet observation, made by candlelight, that has never once been overturned. The 22nd fact is that Christian Huygens was one of the great minds of his century, and Titan was only one of the things he gave us. He invented the pendulum clock, which for the first time let people measure time accurately enough to be useful. He worked out the wave theory of light, an idea so far ahead of its moment that it took nearly 200 years to be properly accepted. He wrote on probability, on mathematics, on the possibility of life on other worlds. He was patient, careful, and endlessly curious. And on a cold March night, he looked up and found a whole world nobody had known was there. The 23rd fact is that Huygens found Titan with a telescope he and his elder brother Constantine had ground and polished themselves. The lenses of that age were dreadful things, blurred and rimmed with false color, and the brothers set out to make better ones. They developed their own methods of grinding and figuring glass, and built long, slender, awkward instruments that gave far sharper images than anything else then available. The telescope that first showed Titan magnified about 50 times, no more than a decent pair of modern binoculars. What made the difference was not power but clarity, and the patience of two brothers at a grinding wheel. The 24th fact is that the very same telescope and the very same patience let Huygens solve the great puzzle of Saturn itself. For half a century astronomers had been baffled by the planet's changing shape. Galileo had seen strange handles on either side of it that appeared and then vanished. Others thought Saturn had ears or attendants or was somehow triple. Huygens realized the truth in 1656, a year after finding Titan, and announced it plainly. Saturn was surrounded by a thin, flat ring, touching it nowhere, tilted to our line of sight. Two of the greatest facts about that planet came from one young man with one homemade lens. The 25th fact is that Huygens never called his discovery Titan, and would not have recognized the name. To him, it was simply Saturni Luna, the moon of Saturn, for there was no other and no confusion was possible. It was the only known companion of the planet for 16 years, until the Italian astronomer Giovanni Cassini began finding others. As those others accumulated, astronomers took to numbering them by their distance, and Titan became rather awkwardly known as Saturn VI. For nearly 2 centuries, the greatest moon in the solar system had no proper name at all, only a place in a list. The 26th fact is that when Huygens first found Titan, he did not announce it openly, but hid the discovery inside a scrambled Latin sentence. This was the custom of the time. A scholar who found something new but wanted more time to confirm it would publish the letters of his claim in a jumbled order, so that he could later reveal the true sentence and prove he had known it first. Huygens published such a puzzle in 1655, and unscrambled it once he was certain. It reads, in translation, that a moon revolves about Saturn in 16 days and 4 hours, a period he had already measured with remarkable accuracy. The 27th fact is that the name Titan was given to the moon nearly 200 years after its discovery, in 1847, by the English astronomer John Herschel. He was the son of William Herschel, the man who discovered Uranus, and he had taken on the tidy but enormous task of bringing order to the naming of the outer solar system. He proposed that Saturn's moons should carry the names of the Titans and their kin from Greek mythology. The largest of them, the first found and the most massive, he simply called Titan. The name settled at once and has never been questioned since. The 28th fact is that the Titans of Greek myth were the elder gods, the generation before the Olympians born of the sky and the earth. Cronus, whom the Romans called Saturn, was himself a Titan and the ruler of them, and he presided over a golden age before his son Zeus overthrew him. So the naming has a certain quiet elegance to it. The planet is the old king, and his moons bear the names of his brothers and sisters, the giants of the world before this one. The largest moon carries the name of the whole family, a fitting title for a world that outweighs all its siblings put together. The 29th fact is that Titan kept its solitude for only 16 years, until Giovanni Domenico Cassini began working through Saturn's moons one by one. In 1671 he found Iapetus, the strange two-faced moon, one hemisphere bright and one nearly black. The following year he found Rhea. Then in 1684, with better instruments, he found Tethys and Dione within days of one another. Cassini had a gift for patient observation and a very good eye. Between Huygens and Cassini, working within a single generation, the essential outline of the Saturn system was drawn, and the name Cassini would return to Saturn 3 centuries later aboard a spacecraft. The 30th fact is that for more than 250 years after its discovery, Titan was nothing but a dot. Telescope after telescope grew larger and clearer, and the great planets slowly gave up their details, their belts and their storms and their polar caps. But Titan gave up nothing at all. It remained a small pale point of light, orange in color when anyone bothered to note it, entirely without features. Generations of astronomers looked at it, wrote it down, and moved on. The largest moon anyone knew of sat there quietly, keeping every one of its secrets, for a very long time indeed. The 31st fact is that in 1907, a Catalan astronomer named José Comasola reported something no one had noticed before. Observing Titan from Barcelona, he wrote that the little disk seemed darker around its rim and brighter at its center, an effect astronomers call limb darkening. On an airless world you would expect nothing of the kind, for a bare surface shows no such gradient. But a body wrapped in atmosphere does exactly this. It was a faint and easily doubted observation, made at the very limit of what his instrument could show. And it was, as it turned out, entirely correct. The 32nd fact is that the real proof came in 1944, when the Dutch-American astronomer Gerard Kuiper turned a spectrograph toward Titan. A spectrograph spreads incoming light into its colors and reveals, in the pattern of dark lines within it, which gases that light has passed through. Kuiper, working at the McDonald Observatory in the mountains of West Texas, found the unmistakable fingerprint of methane. Titan had an atmosphere, and there was no arguing with it. For the first and, so far, the only time a moon had been shown to carry substantial air of its own, a result that changed everything we thought Titan was. The 33rd fact is that Kuiper's discovery made Titan instantly the strangest object in the solar system, and it stayed that way for decades. Moons were supposed to be bare. They were small, their gravity was weak, and whatever gases they might once have held should long since have leaked away into space. Yet here was one holding a real atmosphere, thick enough to detect from 400 million kilometers away. No other satellite anywhere came close. Astronomers had no good explanation and would not have one for many years. Titan simply sat there, wrapped in its impossible air, and quietly refused to fit the rules. The 34th fact is that for a long stretch of the 20th century, Titan was believed to be the largest moon in the solar system, larger even than Ganymede. The mistake was an honest one and rather beautiful in its way. What astronomers were measuring, when they measured the width of Titan's disk, was not the surface at all but the top of that great orange haze, hundreds of kilometers above the ground. The atmosphere made the moon look bigger than it truly is. Only when spacecraft arrived and sounded the real surface did Titan quietly slip into second place, having spent decades wearing a coat several sizes too large. The 35th fact is that the first spacecraft ever to look closely at Titan was Pioneer 11, which swept past Saturn in September of 1979. It carried only simple instruments, and it passed at a distance of some 350,000 kilometers, but it returned the first close photographs of the moon and confirmed that the haze was total. Its images were fuzzy and orange and showed absolutely nothing. Pioneer also measured the temperature and found it far colder than anyone had hoped. It was a first glance, no more, and the first glance said plainly that this was going to be difficult. The 36th fact is that Voyager 1 flew past Titan on the 12th of November, 1980, coming within about 4,000 kilometers of the cloud tops. It was by far the closest look anyone had ever managed. Its cameras were the finest yet flown, and they returned image after image of a perfectly smooth, perfectly blank orange ball. Not one feature, not one break in the haze anywhere across the whole moon. The scientists watching those pictures come in described the feeling as a kind of comic despair. They had come 1 billion kilometers to photograph a world, and photographed a tangerine. The 37th fact is that Voyager 1 gave up the rest of the solar system in order to make that flyby. The mission planners had a choice to make. They could send the spacecraft close by Titan, or they could keep it on a path that would carry it onward to Uranus and Neptune. They could not do both. They chose Titan, judging its strange atmosphere more valuable than 2 more planets, and the close pass flung Voyager 1 up and out of the plane of the planets forever. It never visited another world. The whole of its remaining journey was spent leaving, and Titan was the reason. The 38th fact is that although Voyager saw nothing of the surface, its instruments learned an enormous amount about the air above it. By watching how the spacecraft's radio signal faded as it passed behind the moon, engineers measured the atmosphere's density and depth with real precision. They found the pressure at the surface to be about 1.5 times that of the Earth. They found the atmosphere to be mostly nitrogen, not methane as had been assumed. And they found the temperature, that terrible 94 Kelvin, holding steady across the whole globe. The tangerine had given up its recipe, if not its face. The 39th fact is that Voyager 2 passed Titan the following year but was deliberately kept at a distance, and that decision shaped the exploration of the outer solar system. Since Voyager 1 had already sacrificed itself for a close look, mission planners sent Voyager 2 sailing onward instead, out to Uranus in 1986 and Neptune in 1989, the only visits either planet has ever received. So Titan not only kept its own secret, it indirectly gave us our only close portraits of the 2 farthest planets. A strange and generous consolation for a world that had refused to be seen. The 40th fact is that from that first March night in 1655 until the very end of the 20th century, more than 340 years, no human being had the faintest idea what Titan's surface looked like. 12 generations of astronomers knew there was a world there. They measured its orbit, weighed it, found its air, argued over its chemistry, and named it after giants. And in all that time, not one of them ever saw the ground. It was the longest-standing closed door in the solar system, and it stayed shut patiently until almost within living memory. The 41st fact is that Titan's atmosphere is made almost entirely of nitrogen, about 95% of it, with roughly 5% methane and a whisper of other things besides. And that composition should stop you for a moment, because the air you are breathing right now in this room in the dark is about 78% nitrogen. Titan and the Earth are the only two bodies in the solar system with thick nitrogen atmospheres. Nowhere else has anything like it. Mars has a thin skin of carbon dioxide. Venus has a crushing one. But out there, past the rings, a small orange moon breathes very nearly the same gas that you do. The 42nd fact is that the pressure at Titan's surface is about 1.5 times the pressure here, roughly 1.5 bar, which is a remarkably comfortable number. It is about what a swimmer feels 5 meters underwater, or what you would feel in a slightly overpressurized aircraft cabin. It is not a crushing weight. It would not harm you. If you could somehow stand on the shore of a Titan sea, you would not need a pressure suit at all, nor any of the rigid armor that keeps an astronaut alive in vacuum. The air would simply press against you, gently and evenly, a little firmer than home and nothing more. The 43rd fact is that what you would need on Titan is not pressure, but warmth and oxygen. You would need a heated suit, thickly insulated, to keep that terrible cold from drawing the life out of you within minutes. And you would need a mask and a tank because there is no free oxygen there to breathe. But you would not need the bulky, stiff, balloon-like garment that space demands. You could wear something closer to a heavy diving suit and move in it and bend your arms and legs. Of every surface in the solar system beyond the Earth, Titan is by far the easiest one to visit, which is a strange thing to say about a place so cold. The 44th fact is that Titan's atmosphere is enormously tall, reaching upward some 600 kilometers before it thins away into nothing. Our own atmosphere is effectively finished by about 100 kilometers up, where the sky turns black and satellites can orbit. Titan's air stands 6 times higher than that. Layers of haze have been traced even farther out, drifting hundreds of kilometers above the ground. It is the deepest atmosphere on any solid body we know of, an ocean of gas so tall that a spacecraft skimming 1,000 kilometers above the surface can still feel it faintly brushing past. A world wrapped many times over. The 45th fact is that Titan's atmosphere reaches so high for 2 simple reasons, working together. The moon's gravity is weak, only 1/7 of ours, so the air is not held down tightly and puffs outward far more readily. And the whole column is bitterly cold, which keeps the molecules slow and sluggish rather than fast enough to escape entirely. Weak pull and slow molecules together make a tall, distended, gently swollen envelope of gas. It is the same reason a balloon floats higher on a warm afternoon, run backward and stretched across a whole world. A very large atmosphere held very loosely. The 46th fact is that because the atmosphere is so deep and the gravity so slight, there is actually more nitrogen sitting above any given patch of Titan than above any patch of the Earth. Column for column, Titan carries a heavier load of air on its shoulders than we do, something like 4 or 5 times as much. The moon has managed to keep a larger blanket of gas than the whole of our planet, despite being smaller than Mercury and having almost no gravity to hold it with. How it did so, and where all that nitrogen came from, is a question astronomers are still working carefully through. The 47th fact is that the nitrogen almost certainly did not arrive as nitrogen at all, but as ammonia. In the cold outer solar system, ammonia ice is common, and it would have been folded into Titan as the moon assembled from the debris around the newborn Saturn. Warmed from within, that ammonia could seep upward and reach the surface, where sunlight and energetic particles would slowly break it apart, splitting away its hydrogen and leaving nitrogen behind. Over the ages, the hydrogen escaped to space, being light, and the heavier nitrogen stayed. Titan's air was cooked out of its own ice, very slowly over billions of years. The 48th fact is that the haze which hides Titan is not one layer but many, arranged in soft concentric shells like the skins of an onion. The main haze begins high, around 300 kilometers up, and thickens steadily downward. Above it, Voyager found a separate detached layer, a thin luminous shell floating apart from the rest, hundreds of kilometers above the main deck. Cassini watched that detached layer rise and fall with the seasons, breathing slowly across years. Seen from the side, at just the right angle, the whole arrangement glows in delicate blue and gold rings around the dark limb of the moon, one of the loveliest sights in all of planetary science. The 49th fact is that the haze is made in the very top of the atmosphere, hundreds of kilometers above the ground, where sunlight first touches the gas. Ultraviolet light and charged particles from Saturn's magnetic field strike the nitrogen and methane there and break them into fragments. Those fragments are restless things, and they join eagerly with one another, building larger and larger molecules, chains and rings of carbon and nitrogen and hydrogen. What begins as simple gas ends as heavy, sticky, reddish particles too heavy to stay aloft. The whole orange veil of Titan is manufactured, continuously, in the sunlight at the top of the sky. The 50th fact is that those haze particles, once they grow heavy enough, begin to fall. And they fall for a very long time, sinking through 600 kilometers of thick, cold, still air under a seventh of Earth's gravity is not a quick journey. A single grain may drift downward for years before it ever reaches the ground. All across Titan, all the time, a fine organic snow is settling out of the sky, silent and unhurried, coating everything below in a soft, dark dust. It has been falling for a very long while. The dunes of Titan are made of it, piled up grain by patient grain. The 51st fact is that from Titan's surface you would never see a single star. The haze scatters light so thoroughly that the sky becomes a uniform glowing dome, much as a heavy overcast day here erases every trace of what lies above it. There would be no constellations, no Saturn, no rings, no moons of Saturn drifting past, not even a clear disk of the sun. Only a soft amber ceiling, faintly brighter in the direction of the hidden sun, shading toward brown near the horizon. It is a sky with nothing in it at all, and yet, by every account of those who have modeled it, an extraordinarily beautiful one. The 52nd fact is that daylight on Titan is about 1,000 times fainter than daylight on the Earth, and yet that is still perfectly usable light. It is comparable to the last minutes of dusk here, after the sun has gone but before the streetlights matter, or to a heavily overcast afternoon beneath a very dark sky. You could read a book in it, given a little time for your eyes to adjust. You could walk without stumbling. It is not darkness. It is a permanent, soft, unchanging twilight, the kind of light in which everything looks quiet and slightly unreal. The 53rd fact is that all of Titan's light arrives diffusely, from every direction at once, and that gives the landscape a strange and gentle quality. With no clear sun in the sky, there are no sharp shadows anywhere. Nothing is lit from one side. Every rock, every dune, every ripple on the sea receives the same soft glow from the whole dome above. It is the lighting of a foggy morning, or of a photographer's softbox spread across an entire world. Depth would be hard to judge. Distances would blur. Titan is a place without contrast, which is exactly why it looks in every real photograph so dreamlike. The 54th fact is that the methane in Titan's air is doomed, and that is one of the great puzzles about the place. Sunlight steadily breaks methane apart in the upper atmosphere, and the pieces build into heavier compounds that rain out and never return as gas. At the observed rate, every last molecule of methane in Titan's atmosphere should be gone within perhaps 30 million years, an eye blink against the age of the solar system. Yet there it is, 5% of the air as abundant as ever. Something must be resupplying it from below, and we do not yet know for certain what. The 55th fact is that the leading explanation for the endless methane is that Titan is quietly exhaling it from inside. Deep beneath the ice, methane may be locked into cage-like structures of frozen water called clathrates, released slowly as the interior shifts and warms. Cryovolcanoes may vent it upward in episodes, or vast reservoirs of liquid methane may lie in the crust, seeping steadily to the surface. Whatever the mechanism, Titan appears to be breathing out the very gas that makes its weather. The moon feeds its own sky, and has been doing so apparently for a very long time. The 56th fact is that each winter a great hood of dense haze forms over Titan's darkened pole, a feature astronomers call the polar vortex. When one hemisphere turns away from the sun for its 7-year winter, the air there cools and sinks, and a vast spinning cap of concentrated haze and exotic chemicals settles over the pole. Cassini watched one dissolve over the north and another form over the south, tracking the change year after year. It is weather on a scale we can hardly imagine, a single storm system the width of a continent turning slowly, and taking a decade to complete a thought. The 57th fact is that Titan's atmosphere turns faster than Titan does, which is a strange thing for an atmosphere to do. The solid moon rotates once in about 16 days, but the upper air races around the globe far more quickly, completing a circuit in only a few days. Astronomers call this superrotation, and the only other place in the solar system that does it clearly is Venus. The air has, in effect, slipped its moorings and gone on ahead. High above the dunes, great rivers of wind stream endlessly eastward, entirely out of step with the ground below. The 58th fact is that while the winds high above Titan blow at hurricane speed, down at the surface the air is almost perfectly still. The Huygens probe measured winds of around 430 kilometers per hour near the top of its descent, and watched them slacken steadily as it fell. In the last kilometers the breeze died away to almost nothing, less than a meter per second, softer than a sigh. Standing on Titan you would feel scarcely any wind at all on most days. The great storms are all far overhead, and the ground is a very quiet place. The 59th fact is that sound behaves beautifully on Titan, better than it does anywhere else we could stand. The air is dense, about 4.5 times denser than ours, and denser air carries sound more efficiently and further. Your voice would sound deeper there, and lower, and would travel a remarkable distance across the still ground. A shout would carry for kilometers. Musical instruments would sound wrong and wonderful. Of all the worlds beyond the Earth, Titan is the only one where two people could stand and simply talk to one another, if they could survive the cold to do it. The 60th fact is that when you put all of it together, Titan is a world sealed inside a soft orange envelope, warm in mood and freezing in fact. A moon wrapped in air deeper than any other, breathing nitrogen like our own planet, making its own smog in the sunlight, letting it drift down as snow for years at a time, and living underneath a sky that never once shows a star. Everything about that atmosphere is gentle. Nothing about it is violent. It simply hangs there, thick and still and glowing faintly, a blanket drawn over a sleeping world. The 61st fact is that Titan has a full weather cycle exactly like our own, except that it runs on methane instead of water, Liquid methane gathers into pools and seas. Some of it evaporates and rises. High in the cold air, it condenses into clouds. Those clouds thicken and eventually let go, and rain falls back down through 600 kilometers of orange sky. The rain gathers into streams, the streams into rivers, the rivers into seas, and the whole flow begins again. Every step of it is familiar. Only the substance has been quietly exchanged, and that single swap makes the whole world alien. The 62nd fact is that on Titan the water is the rock and the rock is nowhere to be seen. Down at 94 Kelvin, water ice is stone. Nothing about the arrangement is arbitrary, for it is simply what the same physics does at a different temperature. It forms the cliffs and the hills and the pebbles underfoot. Meanwhile, methane, which on Earth is a gas we burn and think nothing of, sits comfortably in its liquid range and behaves the way water behaves at home. Puddles. It flows. It soaks into the ground. It evaporates in the faint warmth of the hidden sun. Everything has traded places quietly and completely, and the result works perfectly well. The 63rd fact is that the rain on Titan is not pure methane but a mixture, mostly methane with a good deal of ethane and a trace of dissolved nitrogen. Ethane is a heavier cousin of methane, made in the upper atmosphere when sunlight breaks methane apart and the fragments rejoin in pairs. It rains down too, and being less eager to evaporate, it tends to linger in the seas and slowly accumulate there. So the rivers of Titan run with a kind of cold fuel cocktail, clear and thin and utterly odorless. A liquid you would recognize instantly, if only you could stand to touch it. The 64th fact is that clouds on Titan are surprisingly rare, and finding one is something of an event. For long stretches, the sky over most of the moon holds nothing but haze, unbroken from horizon to horizon. For long stretches, Cassini's teams had nothing whatever to report except an unbroken and entirely cloudless sky. Cassini spent years watching, and for much of that time the globe was cloudless. Then clouds would appear, usually near whichever pole was in summer, sometimes in mid-latitude bands, brightening and spreading and fading again over a few days. Astronomers learned to watch for them the way birdwatchers watch for a rare visitor, patiently, and with a certain quiet delight when one finally arrived. The 65th fact is that Cassini watched clouds form, grow, and vanish over Titan across 13 years, and in doing so gave us the first weather report from another world's troposphere. The clouds were made of methane droplets, sometimes of ethane, and they behaved much as ours do, building upward in convective towers and spreading into thin veils at the top. Some covered areas larger than whole countries. From orbit they appeared as pale bright smudges against the orange, easy to miss and unmistakable once you learned the look of them. Whether on a moon of Saturn watched in real time, which no one before that generation had ever seen. The 66th fact is that raindrops on Titan are enormous, far bigger than any raindrop that has ever fallen here. A large drop on Earth is about 5 millimeters across before the wind tears it apart. A drop that large would wobble visibly as it came down, changing shape the whole way. On Titan, where gravity is gentle and the drop falls slowly through thick air, a raindrop can reach nearly a centimeter in width and hold perhaps 20 times the volume of a heavy drop of ours. They are fat, slow, wobbling spheres of cold, clear liquid, sagging as they fall. If one struck your hand, you would feel it clearly, a soft, heavy, deliberate tap. The 67th fact is that Titan's rain falls very slowly, drifting downward at something like 1.5 meters each second. Rain here falls perhaps 6 times faster, arriving with a hiss and a rattle. There, the drops descend at roughly the pace of a large snowflake in still air, taking their time, wandering slightly on the way down. A rainstorm on Titan would be almost silent, a long, soft curtain of falling liquid rather than a downpour. You could watch a single drop for several seconds as it came toward you, and step aside if you wished before it landed. The 68th fact is that most of Titan is extremely dry, and rain in many places may fall only once in centuries. The equatorial regions in particular appear to be deserts in the truest sense. Vast fields of dune and dust where nothing has run for a very long time. Whole decades can pass over a given patch of that ground without a single drop reaching it. The methane cycle is enormously slow, slower even than our own by a wide margin, because the sunlight driving it is so faint. Evaporation crawls. Clouds take an age to gather. And so the storms, when they finally do arrive, are rare and dramatic events. Long droughts broken by sudden, generous flooding. The 69th fact is that in 2010, Cassini watched an enormous storm sweep across Titan's equator and leave the ground visibly changed. A great arrow-shaped cloud formed over the dune fields and moved eastward across a swathe of the moon. When it had passed, a vast region that had been bright appeared distinctly darker in the images, over an area of some 500,000 square kilometers. The most natural explanation was simply that the ground was wet. It had rained on the desert for the first time anyone had ever seen, and the moon had darkened wherever that rain had touched it. The 70th fact is that the polar regions of Titan are the wet parts of the world, where the weather truly happens. During the long polar summer, the sun, faint as it is, warms the northern seas enough to lift methane into the air, and great cloud systems form and let go. Nothing else Cassini watched in 13 years altered the surface so quickly or so plainly. Cassini watched clouds gather over the northern lakes as spring came on, after years of stillness. It is a monsoon of a kind, spread across 7-year seasons, driving the whole cycle of the moon. The tropics are desert and the poles are wet, which is very nearly the opposite of home. The 71st fact is that radar images from Cassini revealed branching networks of river channels across Titan, and they look astonishingly like river networks on the Earth. They fork and rejoin. They wind. They cut down through the terrain and carve out valleys. Geologists who study rivers here looked at those pictures and recognized, instantly and without hesitation, the same patterns they had spent careers mapping in Utah and Africa. Flowing liquid makes the same shapes wherever it flows, whatever it happens to be made of. The physics does not care about the chemistry, and Titan proves it drainage basin by drainage basin. The 72nd fact is that the most remarkable of Titan's river systems is a great canyon network in the north called Vid Flumina. It is a branching system of steep-sided gorges, running for hundreds of kilometers across the icy terrain and emptying at last into one of the great northern seas. The name means simply the river Vid, borrowed from a river in the Old Norse stories. Cassini's radar caught it in 2013, and the images show a dark, sinuous line splitting into tributaries like the veins of a leaf. It is the clearest river on Titan, and one of the most beautiful things any spacecraft has ever photographed. A valley carved by rain 900 million miles from here. The 73rd fact is that the canyons of Vid Flumina are deep, some of them between 240 and 570 meters from rim to floor, and they are steep, with walls that stand at severe angles rather than sloping gently away. That combination, deep and narrow, tells geologists that the liquid cut downward quickly rather than wandering slowly sideways, which in turn suggests either a rising landscape or a falling sea level, or perhaps both. Titan has its own tectonic history written into those walls. Something lifted that ground and the rivers saw down through it, exactly as the Colorado did through Arizona. The 74th fact is that Cassini's radar found the floors of the Vid Flumina canyons to be smooth and mirror-flat in a way that only one thing explains: they were filled with liquid. It is the closest thing to a living river that anyone has ever detected beyond the Earth. The radar echo came back exactly as it does from a still surface, dark and specular, quite unlike the rough scatter of dry ground. So those canyons are not dry riverbeds. They are running rivers, or at the very least standing channels of liquid methane, right now, tonight, flowing quietly down toward the sea. The only rivers besides our own that anyone has ever confirmed. The 75th fact is that where Titan's rivers reach the seas, they build deltas, spreading their load of sediment into fans at the water's edge. Radar images of the northern coasts show these fans clearly, wide triangular deposits at the mouths of channels, branching into distributaries just as the Nile and the Mississippi do. Building a delta requires a river carrying material, a standing body of liquid to slow it, and enough time for the sediment to settle. All three are present on Titan. The moon is quietly doing sedimentary geology, with organic sand and liquid natural gas. The 76th fact is that when the Huygens probe photographed the ground where it landed, it found rounded pebbles, and rounded pebbles are a signature that cannot be faked. Stones become smooth and rounded only by tumbling in moving liquid, knocking against each other for a long while until every edge is worn away. You cannot round a stone by any other process, so the shape itself is a record of motion. The pebbles in that photograph are unmistakably rounded, some of them almost perfectly so, and they lie in a shallow depression that looks for all the world like a dry streambed. That single picture proved that liquid had flowed there, proof lying quietly on the ground, waiting to be seen. The 77th fact is that many of Titan's river channels appear to be dry most of the time, holding liquid only after rare storms. They are what geologists here would call ephemeral streams, the same kind that scar the deserts of Arizona and Namibia, empty for years and then suddenly running hard after a cloudburst. The Huygens landing site sits in exactly such a landscape, a network of dry valleys draining down toward a darker plain. The floods there may come once a century or once a millennium, but when they come, they move whole fields of stones, and then the desert falls quiet again. The 78th fact is that erosion on Titan is extraordinarily gentle, and everything it makes takes an age to appear. The liquid is thin and light. Given long enough, a whisper will carve a canyon just as surely as a shout would. The gravity is weak. The rain is slow. Nothing there hits hard. And yet the landscape is clearly and thoroughly carved, with valleys and deltas and worn hills everywhere the radar looked. What Titan lacks in force it has made up in time, working steadily across hundreds of millions of years with the softest possible touch. It is the patient sculptor of the solar system, never hurrying and never once stopping. The 79th fact is that if you set a radar map of Titan's northern rivers beside a radar map of somewhere on the Earth, and removed the labels, a great many geologists could not reliably tell you which was which. The same forking channels, the same rounded coastal bays, the same fans and floodplains and dissected uplands. It is one of the eeriest resemblances in all of planetary science, because nothing about the ingredients is the same. Different liquid, different rock, different temperature, different gravity, different star. And the landscape comes out looking like home, which says something rather deep about the universe. The 80th fact is that somewhere on Titan tonight, while you are lying here, it is very probably raining. Somewhere over the northern seas, a soft methane drizzle is falling through the amber gloom, drop by fat, slow drop, dimpling the still black surface below. The clouds gather, the drops form, and the whole slow will turns without an audience of any kind. Somewhere a river is running quietly down its canyon toward the shore. Nobody is there to see it. Nobody has ever seen it. It has been going on unwitnessed for a very long time and will go on long after tonight. A steady, gentle rain falling in the dark, 1 billion kilometers away. The 81st fact is that Titan has seas, real standing bodies of liquid large enough to deserve the word, and there are 3 of them. They are gathered almost entirely around the northern pole, spread across a region of low icy ground, and they are joined by hundreds of smaller lakes scattered between them. Astronomers give them the Latin name Mare, the same word used for the dark plains of our own moon, except that on Titan the seas are genuinely wet. They were found by radar in 2006, and their discovery was the moment Titan stopped being a mystery and became a place. The 82nd fact is that the largest of them is called Kraken Mare, and it covers something like 400,000 square kilometers. That is a sea larger than the Caspian, the greatest inland body of water on the Earth. Its many arms reach so far apart that opposite ends of it lie in quite different climates. It sprawls across Titan's northern hemisphere in a long, complicated, many-armed shape, with narrow straits and deep bays and a coastline so intricate that mapping it took years. If you set out to sail it, you would cross a distance greater than the width of the Mediterranean. It is the biggest known body of standing liquid anywhere in the solar system beyond our own world. The 83rd fact is that Kraken Mare takes its name from the great sea monster of Norwegian legend, and that is no accident of whimsy. The astronomers who name features on Titan agreed early on that its seas would carry the names of sea creatures from the world's mythologies, its lakes the names of lakes on Earth, its mountains the names from Tolkien, and its plains the names from Frank Herbert's desert novel. So the map of Titan reads like a library catalog of human imagination. It is one of the few places where scientific nomenclature turned deliberately and rather beautifully toward poetry. The 84th fact is that the second of Titan's seas is Ligeia Mare, named for one of the sirens whose singing lured sailors from their course. It covers about 126,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of Lake Superior and Lake Huron together, and it lies nearer the pole than Kraken. Naming a sea of liquid methane after a monster of the northern waters was, everyone agreed, entirely appropriate. Its shape is smoother and rounder, its coastline less broken, and it was the first of the seas whose depth anyone managed to measure. There is something fitting in a sea of methane bearing the name of a voice that draws you gently somewhere you did not intend to go. The 85th fact is that the third sea is Punga Mare, the smallest of the 3, named after a figure in Maori legend said to be the ancestor of sharks and lizards. It covers perhaps 30,000 square kilometers, small only by the standards of its neighbors, and would still swallow a good many countries whole. It sits close to the North Pole, nestled between the other 2, a dark rounded patch on the radar maps. 3 seas, 100 lakes, and a scattering of empty basins, all crowded into one hemisphere of a moon, a small strange region of standing liquid at the top of the world. The 86th fact is that Cassini measured the depth of Ligeia Mare by bouncing radar off its surface and off its floor and timing the difference between the 2 echoes. The result was about 160 meters at the deepest point sounded. That made Ligeia the first sea beyond the Earth whose floor anyone had ever touched, even with radio. That is a genuine sea, deep enough to hide a building, deep enough to have a proper bottom well out of reach. And it means the radar beam passed cleanly through more than 100 meters of liquid and came back, which tells you that the methane down there is extraordinarily pure and clear, as transparent to radio waves as good glass is to light. The 87th fact is that Kraken Mare turned out to be deeper than the radar could measure at all. In the central basin of the greatest sea, the signal simply went in and never returned, which means the liquid there is at least 300 meters deep and quite possibly a good deal more. Some estimates put it near 1,000. Either the sea is too deep to sound, or its composition is richer in ethane, which absorbs the radar and swallows the beam. Whichever it is, the deepest part of Kraken remains genuinely unmeasured, a dark, unknown quantity in the far north of Titan. The 88th fact is that the seas are made of methane and ethane mixed together, with a quantity of nitrogen dissolved into them. The proportions differ from sea to sea and even from one arm to another. Nitrogen slips in and out of solution as the temperature and the pressure shift across the seasons. Ligeia seems to be largely methane, remarkably pure. Kraken appears richer in ethane, heavier and darker. Nitrogen dissolves into the cold liquid the way carbon dioxide dissolves into soda water. And when conditions change, it can come fizzing out again in clouds of bubbles. The seas of Titan are, in the most literal sense, carbonated, and they very likely fizz. The 89th fact is that liquid methane is much less dense than water, only about 450 kilograms to the cubic meter, which is less than half the density of the sea, And that has a consequence worth pausing over. You would not float in a Titan sea. A human body, even in the gentlest suit, is far denser than that liquid, and you would sink through it like a stone through air. Ships built for those waters would need to be enormously light. It looks like an ocean and it moves like an ocean, but it would not hold you up. The 90th fact is that all three of Titan's great seas lie in the north, and the south has almost none, which puzzled astronomers for years. The answer appears to lie in the shape of Saturn's orbit around the Sun. The difference sounds small, but stretched across thousands of orbits, it is enough to move entire seas. Saturn's path is slightly oval, and at present the northern summer on Titan is longer and cooler, while the southern summer is shorter and hotter. Over long stretches of time, that difference drives methane slowly northward, where it collects and stays. The imbalance flips every few tens of thousands of years. Titan's seas migrate from pole to pole, very slowly, like everything else there. The 91st fact is that surrounding the great seas are hundreds of smaller lakes, and many of them are strikingly, almost unnaturally round. They have steep raised rims and sharply defined edges, and they sit in a landscape that shows no sign of impact cratering. Geologists think they may be something like the sinkholes and lake basins that form on Earth where slightly acidic rainwater dissolves limestone away from beneath. On Titan, the rain would dissolve organic solids instead of carbonate rock, but the result is the same kind of pitted, pocked, gently collapsing terrain. A karst landscape at 94 Kelvin. The 92nd fact is that some of Titan's lakes have been seen to appear and disappear, filling and drying across the seasons. Cassini's radar found basins that were empty on one pass and holding liquid on a later one, and others that quietly drained away between visits. A map of Titan drawn a century from now would not quite match the one we have. These are Titan's ephemeral lakes, playas that flood after the rare polar storms and evaporate back into the sky. They chart the moon's slow breathing. There is nothing permanent about the map of Titan's water, if we may call it that. The shorelines move on their own schedule, and no one is there to notice. The 93rd fact is that in 2013, Cassini's radar caught something in Ligeia Mare that had not been there before. A bright patch in the middle of the smooth, dark sea. The scientists nicknamed it the Magic Island. On the next pass, it was gone. On a later pass, something like it appeared again elsewhere. Nobody is entirely certain what it was. The best guesses are waves stirred by a spring wind, or bubbles of nitrogen fizzing up from below, or a floating raft of solid organics briefly lifted to the surface. Titan produced a mystery, and then quietly took it back. The 94th fact is that the seas of Titan are astonishingly, almost impossibly smooth. When Cassini bounced radar off them, the return signal showed a surface flat to within a few millimeters across enormous distances. Whatever it was, it appeared and vanished on a timescale of weeks rather than years. There is no swell. There is no chop. The waves that have been detected, on the very rare occasions any were detected at all, stood only a centimeter or two high and moved at a walking pace. Kraken Mare, larger than the Caspian, lies as still as a pane of black glass, hundreds of thousands of square kilometers without a ripple. The 95th fact is that the stillness of those seas comes from several gentle things acting together. The surface winds on Titan are very light, usually less than a meter per second, and it takes wind to raise a wave. The liquid itself is thin and slippery, and the low gravity means waves need far more energy to build than they would here. Add to that the great density of the air pressing down evenly on the surface, and you have conditions in which the sea can hardly be disturbed at all. Titan's oceans are, in every sense, at rest, and have been for a very long while. The 96th fact is that the seas are joined to one another by narrow straits, and one of them has a name and a rather thrilling reputation. It is called Selden Freedom, sometimes nicknamed the Throat of Kraken, a passage only a few tens of kilometers wide that connects two great arms of the largest sea. Nothing else on that moon moves with anything like the same energy. Because it is narrow and the basins on either side are huge, the tides of Titan must force enormous volumes of liquid through it twice each orbit. Models suggest a current running at a meter per second or more, roaring quietly through the gap. The fastest water on Titan, and the only turbulence. The 97th fact is that Titan has tides, raised by Saturn, and they are far stronger than any tide the moon raises here. Saturn is a vast body and Titan is comparatively close to it, and the moon's orbit is slightly oval, so the pull varies through each circuit. The result is a tidal rise and fall that lifts and lowers the seas across roughly 16 days rather than twice a day. The shorelines must creep out and back in enormous slow breaths. A single tide on Titan takes 8 days to come in, and 8 more to go quietly out again. The 98th fact is that the seas of Titan are almost perfectly black, and would look black to your eyes if you stood beside one. They absorb the faint amber daylight and reflect back almost nothing at all, which is exactly why the radar maps show them as pools of pure darkness against the brighter ground. Sailing across it would be something like crossing a great sheet of polished obsidian in the dark. But a still black surface is also a mirror, and at a low angle it would throw back the glow of the sky above. So you would see a sheet of darkness in front of you, edged with a long soft reflection of orange, and no motion in it anywhere. The 99th fact is that in 2009, Cassini caught the sunlight glinting directly off one of Titan's northern lakes. A single bright spark of reflection in the infrared. It is called a specular reflection, the same flash you see when the setting sun catches a distant window. It was the first time anyone had seen sunlight bounce off a liquid surface on another world. That one small spark, caught by an instrument 900 million miles from home, confirmed beyond all further argument that the dark patches were wet, a glint of light on a distant shore. The 100th fact is that if you could stand at the edge of Kraken Mare tonight, you would find yourself in one of the quietest places that exists, a perfectly flat black sea stretching away to a hazy amber horizon, without a wave, without a sound, without a single star above it. The only motion anywhere in that landscape would be your own, and even that would be slow. The soft glow of the sky reflected in the surface. Somewhere far out, a slow tide gathering itself over the course of days. It has been like that for millions of years, and it will be like that tomorrow. There is nothing there to disturb anything, which is perhaps the most restful thought in the solar system. The 101st fact is that while the poles of Titan are wet, the middle of the moon is one enormous desert, covered in fields of dunes. They are not sand dunes in the way you would picture them, though they look exactly like sand dunes from orbit. They run in long parallel ridges across thousands of kilometers, wrapping around obstacles, splitting and rejoining, marching steadily eastward. Cassini's radar found them almost at once, and no one quite believed the pictures at first. The equator of Titan looks precisely like the Namib Desert seen from an aircraft window, and it is made of something else entirely. The 102nd fact is that Titan's dunes cover something like 17% of the entire surface of the moon, which makes them the largest known dune fields anywhere. Spread out, they would cover an area comparable to the United States. Seen in infrared light, those two dark belts are the most obvious markings on the entire moon. The two greatest fields have been given names from the desert of Frank Herbert's novel, Belay and Shangri-La, dark bands lying across the equator, visible from orbit as broad shadowy regions on the otherwise brighter globe. To look at Titan through infrared eyes is to see a bright world with two enormous dark belts wrapped around its middle, and both of them are made of dunes. The 103rd fact is that Titan's dunes are the long linear kind, the type geologists call longitudinal, and they are very large. A typical one stands about 100 meters tall, measures 1 to 2 kilometers across, and runs unbroken for 100 kilometers or more. Some stretch for several hundred. They lie in almost perfectly parallel ranks, like the furrows of an unimaginably vast plowed field, and they are spaced with striking regularity. From above they look combed. Whatever wind arranged them worked steadily in one direction for an extremely long time, and it is still working now. The 104th fact is that the sand of Titan is not sand at all, but grains of the organic haze that has been falling from the sky for ages. Those tholin particles, drifting down for years through the still air, gather on the ground and slowly clump and harden into grains about the size of coffee grounds. A handful of it would feel light and faintly greasy, nothing at all like the sand of a beach. They are dark, soft, and very light, perhaps a third the density of the quartz sand of a beach here. So the great dunes are built of accumulated smog, packed and shaped by the wind. Titan is burying itself, gently, in its own falling sky. The 105th fact is that the dunes of Titan present a puzzle that took years to work out, because they point the wrong way. They are aligned as though the wind blows steadily from west to east across the equator, yet the general circulation of Titan's lower atmosphere ought to push the other way. The resolution seems to be that the dunes are built not by the everyday breeze but by rare, powerful gusts that arrive around the equinoxes, when the sun crosses the equator and the whole weather system briefly reverses. The dunes remember only the strongest days and ignore all the quiet ones between. The 106th fact is that the wind that built those dunes is remarkably feeble by our standards, blowing at perhaps 1.5 meters per second at the surface. That is a stroll, a breeze you would scarcely notice against your face. Titan builds its largest landforms with the very smallest possible touch. But Titan's air is 4.5 times denser than ours, so it pushes with far more force than the speed suggests, and the grains it is pushing are light and easily lifted in that gentle gravity. A slow breeze in thick air moves what a gale would move here. Everything on Titan is done softly, including the building of mountains of dust. The 107th fact is that in the middle of all that darkness lies a great bright region called Xanadu, roughly the size of Australia. It was first seen from the Earth in the 1990s, when astronomers used the Hubble telescope and infrared filters to peer through the haze and found a large pale continent on an otherwise dark globe. They named it for the pleasure dome of Coleridge's poem. It remains the single most prominent feature on Titan, and even now, decades later, we do not entirely understand what it is. A bright island in a sea of dunes. The 108th fact is that when Cassini's radar finally looked closely at Xanadu, it found a rugged, complicated, thoroughly worked over landscape. There are hills and ridges, deep valleys, dry river channels running down from high ground, and what appear to be worn old mountains. Some geologists suspect it is simply the oldest surviving terrain anywhere on the moon. It looks like an ancient terrain that has been rained on for a very long time and eroded down. Some of the largest river networks on Titan drain across it. Whatever Xanadu is, it is old, and it has weather history written all over it. An entire continent of eroded ice. The 109th fact is that Titan has mountain ranges, and they are made of water ice standing hard as granite. The tallest known peak is in a range called Mithram Montes, rising about 3,300 meters above the surrounding plains. That is a proper mountain comparable to a good alpine summit, and it stands on a moon a seventh the size of the Earth in gravity. To climb it you would need almost no effort at all, though the walk would be long. Ice mountains in an orange twilight above a desert of soot, which is very nearly the strangest sentence in planetary science. The 110th fact is that Titan's mountains carry names taken from the mountains of Middle-earth, because the naming convention agreed upon calls for peaks from Tolkien's writings, so there is Mithram Montes and Erebor Mons and Doom Mons, and ridges named for Misty and for Angmar, scattered across an orange moon 900 million miles away. Every feature in that region was named by a committee which clearly enjoyed its work. It is a small, quiet gift from one generation of scientists to everyone who ever loved those books. When Dragonfly eventually flies over that terrain, it will be flying over landscapes named by people who read by torchlight as children, and never quite got over it. The 111th fact is that Titan has remarkably few impact craters, and that absence tells us something important. Any surface left alone for billions of years accumulates craters steadily, as the Moon and Mercury plainly show. Titan has only a handful, perhaps a few dozen confirmed across the whole globe. That means the surface is being erased and renewed, buried under falling haze, washed by rain, drifted over by dunes, perhaps reworked from below. The face of Titan is geologically young, only a few 100 million years old in most places. A world that keeps repainting itself. The 112th fact is that the largest confirmed crater on Titan is called Minerva, and it measures about 400 kilometers across. It is a great multi-ringed basin in the northern part of Xanadu, so worn down and softened by erosion that it took careful work to recognize it for what it was. A world that erases its own craters is a world where something is still going on. Its rim has been cut through by river channels. Its floor has been partly filled in. It is an ancient scar being slowly smoothed away by weather, exactly as an old crater on the Earth would be. Titan does not preserve its wounds. It quietly heals them. The 113th fact is that there is a smaller and much fresher crater called Selk, about 80 kilometers wide, and it has become one of the most important places on Titan. It sits at the edge of the Shangri-La dune field, and its floor shows signs of having held liquid water once, melted briefly by the heat of the impact and then refrozen. That combination, warm water in contact with Titan's rich organic surface, is exactly the situation in which interesting chemistry might have happened. Selk is where the next spacecraft is going, a quiet crater with a great deal riding on it. The 114th fact is that Titan appears to have volcanoes, but they would erupt something no volcano here has ever produced. Astronomers call it cryovolcanism, ice volcanism, and instead of molten rock it would push up a slush of liquid water mixed with ammonia, welling out of the interior and freezing solid on the surface. Its floor may hold the most interesting chemistry anywhere in the solar system beyond our own planet. A feature called Sotra, with a mountain beside it named Dune Mons and a deep pit alongside, is the best candidate anyone has found. The evidence is suggestive rather than certain, but something down there may be quietly resurfacing the world. The 115th fact is that cryolava, if it exists on Titan, would be cold to the touch and would freeze into stone within moments of reaching the air. A water and ammonia mixture stays liquid at temperatures far below the ordinary freezing point, so it can flow at perhaps 200 Kelvin, which is still 80 degrees below anything comfortable. It would ooze rather than pour, thick and pasty, spreading in slow lobes across the ground and hardening as it went. A volcano that erupts freezing mud and builds hills of ice, which is somehow more unsettling than fire. The 116th fact is that between the dunes and the mountains lie enormous flat expanses that scientists call, rather charmingly, the undifferentiated plains. They cover great swathes of Titan's mid-latitudes, smooth and featureless in radar, with nothing much to distinguish one part from another. It would build low rounded domes rather than the steep cones we associate with fire. They are probably vast sheets of fine organic sediment, washed off higher ground by rain and spread out thinly over enormous areas. Think of them as Titan's floodplains, the low, quiet ground where everything eventually settles. Most of the moon, in the end, is simply flat, soft, dark, and endlessly level. The 117th fact is that in a few places Titan shows a strange terrain of deeply dissected plateaus, which geologists call labyrinth terrain. These are elevated regions cut through by dense networks of valleys until only narrow, flat-topped remnants are left standing between them, like a maze carved from above. On Earth, the same pattern forms where rainwater slowly dissolves and erodes an uplifted tableland over immense stretches of time. On Titan, it means the same thing. Some of the highest ground has been rained on so long that it has been all but eaten away, a landscape being quietly dismantled. The 118th fact is that the surface of Titan is layered, with organic sediment lying on top of water ice bedrock, and the two behave quite differently. The soft, dark material can be blown, washed, piled, and buried. Wherever the radar comes back bright, the old ice is showing through the covering. The ice beneath it holds its shape for ages and forms every cliff and ridge and mountain. So Titan is a world of bright, hard ice showing through wherever the dark blanket has been stripped away, and dark, smooth cover wherever it has gathered. The contrast in the radar maps is really a contrast between the two, old bones and new dust. The 119th fact is that everything about the geology of Titan is familiar in shape and utterly foreign in substance, and geologists find this both delightful and disorienting. They can apply every rule they know, every equation of sediment transport and slope stability and channel formation, and the rules work. Only the numbers change. It is as though someone rebuilt the Earth out of entirely different materials and then let the same physics run for 4 billion years. The result is a landscape you would recognize instantly from an airplane window, and could not survive for 30 seconds. The 120th fact is that if you could walk across Titan, you would find, in a single day's journey, dark, soft ground like packed soot underfoot, pale ice hills standing up through it, a dry riverbed winding away toward the horizon, and dunes rising 100 meters into the amber gloom, none of it lit by sun or star. You could walk for a week across that country and never come upon a single sharp edge. All of it silent, all of it colored in the same narrow range of orange and brown and dull gold. It is a real landscape with real distances and real weather, waiting patiently for someone to come and look at it properly. The 121st fact is that on the 14th of January, in the year 2005, A small European probe named Huygens came down through the orange haze and landed softly on the surface of Titan. It was the first and so far the only landing ever made in the outer solar system, and it opened the door that had stayed shut for 350 years. For a few hours, a machine built by human hands sat on the ground of that moon and looked around and told us what it saw. Everything we truly know about standing on Titan comes from that single afternoon. The 122nd fact is that the Huygens probe was built by the European Space Agency and named, with obvious rightness, after the man who found the moon in the first place. It was a squat disk about 2 3/4 meters across, weighing some 320 kilograms, shaped rather like a wok with a lid, packed with 6 instruments and a heat shield and 3 parachutes. There was no second chance built into any part of it anywhere. It had no engine and no ability to steer. Once released, it could only fall. Everything it would ever do had to work perfectly in order, the first time, on a world nobody had ever seen the surface of. The 123rd fact is that Huygens did not travel to Saturn under its own power, but rode there bolted to the side of the Cassini orbiter for 7 years. The two launched together in October of 1997, swung past Venus twice, past the Earth once, past Jupiter, and reached Saturn in the middle of 2004. All that time the little probe was asleep, powered down, waking only for brief health checks every 6 months. It crossed 3.5 billion kilometers as cargo, patient and unpowered, waiting for one specific morning 7 years away. The 124th fact is that Cassini released Huygens on Christmas Day of 2004, pushing it gently away with springs and a small spin to keep it steady. The probe then coasted alone for 20 days, entirely dark and silent, drifting toward Titan on the trajectory it had been given. For 20 days nobody on Earth had any way at all of knowing whether it was still alive. There was no way to correct it and no way to check on it. Cassini turned to watch it recede and photographed a small bright disk falling away into the dark. Then the orbiter moved aside, and the probe went on alone. A machine asleep, falling toward a moon. The 125th fact is that Huygens hit the top of Titan's atmosphere at about 6 kilometers per second and was slowed almost entirely by the air itself. The heat shield glowed and ablated as the friction built, shedding speed in a matter of minutes, until the probe was falling slowly enough for parachutes. Titan's atmosphere is so deep and so thick that entering it is remarkably gentle compared with entering the thin air of Mars. The moon caught the probe softly and set it on its way down, which is very much in keeping with everything else about the place. The 126th fact is that the descent used 3 parachutes in careful sequence. First, a small pilot chute pulled away the back cover. Every one of those steps had to fire in the right order with no human being watching. Then a main canopy 8.5 meters wide opened and slowed the fall dramatically, giving the instruments their first long look at the upper atmosphere. Then, some 15 minutes in, the main chute was cut away and a smaller one deployed, deliberately letting the probe fall faster again so that it would reach the ground before its batteries ran down. It was a delicate balance between seeing more and arriving at all, and the engineers judged it exactly right. The 127th fact is that the whole descent lasted 2 hours and 27 minutes, and it remains one of the most extraordinary journeys ever recorded. For nearly 2.5 hours the probe drifted downward through 600 kilometers of alien air, swinging gently under its canopy, sampling the gas around it, measuring the wind, photographing the ground as it slowly came into view. Nothing about it was hurried. It was less like a landing than like a leaf coming down through a still room, and every second of it was transmitted home. The 128th fact is that the Huygens landing is the farthest landing from the Earth that has ever been made, and it still holds that record more than 20 years later. The probe touched down about 1,200,000,000 kilometers from home. That record is not likely to be challenged within anyone's lifetime. Every other landing anyone has managed on the Moon, on Mars, on Venus, on asteroids and comets took place far closer in. Nothing built by human hands has ever come to rest further away. That record has stood unbroken since 2005. And nothing currently flying is going to break it. The 129th fact is that because Titan is so distant, the radio signals from Huygens took about 67 minutes to reach the Earth. So everything the mission controllers watched had already happened more than an hour before they saw it. When the first data arrived confirming that the parachute had opened, the probe was already long since on the ground. They could do nothing but wait and watch a story unfold that was already finished. The whole landing had been over for the better part of an hour before anyone on Earth knew whether it had succeeded. The 130th fact is that Huygens carried a microphone, and it recorded the sound of the wind on Titan. It is a faint, low, rushing sound, rising and falling as the probe swung beneath its parachute. The noise of thick, cold air moving past a falling machine. There is no music in it and no drama whatever, and somehow that makes it more affecting. It was the first sound ever recorded on another world. You can listen to it today, and people do, and it is a strangely moving thing to hear. It sounds exactly like wind, not like anything alien at all. Just wind, blowing somewhere very far away. The 131st fact is that as the haze thinned below about 40 kilometers, the probe's camera began to return images of the ground, and what appeared was almost impossible to believe. There were hills, there were dark plains, and running down from the high ground toward the plains were unmistakable branching river channels, dozens of them, forking and rejoining exactly like the drainage of a rainy landscape here. In the very first close pictures of Titan's surface, the moon showed us rivers. Nothing anyone had modeled quite prepared them for how familiar it looked. The 132nd fact is that one of the descent images has become quietly famous. A wide view showing a bright rugged upland cut by dark drainage channels, meeting a broad dark plain along what is plainly a shoreline. People who see it for the first time often assume it is an aerial photograph of somewhere in Arizona or Namibia. Every geologist who saw it recognized the landscape at once, and every one of them was startled. It is not. It is a moon of Saturn, photographed from 8 kilometers up by a machine that had been asleep for 7 years. It hangs on a great many office walls, and deserves to hang on a great many more. The 133rd fact is that Huygens landed at a speed of about 4.5 meters per second, which is roughly what you would feel jumping from a table. It was not a crash. It was a bump. The probe came down on a dark plain near the equator, in a region that was almost certainly a dry riverbed or floodplain, and its instruments recorded the impact in exquisite detail. A small probe, after 7 years and 3.5 billion kilometers, arrived with all the drama of someone setting down a suitcase. The 134th fact is that the ground gave way beneath the probe as it landed, and the way it gave way told scientists a great deal. A small penetrometer on the underside recorded a brief sharp resistance, as though breaking through a thin crust, followed by softer material underneath. Nobody had known beforehand whether the probe would come down on solid ground, into a lake, or into something else entirely. The team compared it to snow with a frozen surface layer or to wet sand, and one of them famously described it as being like creme brulee. Titan's ground is not hard rock. It is soft, slightly damp, and gives a little under your weight, which is a peculiarly homely thing to know. The 135th fact is that after landing, the probe's instrument inlet warmed the soil slightly, and methane vapor came rising off it. That is one of the loveliest measurements of the whole mission, because it proves that the ground was damp. Not soaked, not flooded, but moist, with liquid methane held in the soil the way water is held in a riverbank days after the rain. The little machine warmed the dirt beneath it, and the dirt gently steamed. Titan is a wet world in the truest ordinary sense of the word. The 136th fact is that the single photograph taken from the surface shows a flat orange-brown plain scattered with rounded stones. And it is one of the most important pictures ever taken. The stones nearest the camera are perhaps 10 to 15 centimeters across, smooth and worn, lying in shallow depressions. That image took an hour and 7 minutes to cross the dark to the room where people sat waiting. The ground between them is dark and finely grained. The light is soft and comes from everywhere at once. It looks like a dry creek bed at dusk. It is the only view of Titan's surface any human being has ever had, and there has not been another since. The 137th fact is that those rounded stones on Titan are not stone at all, but lumps of water ice, frozen so hard that they behave exactly like rock. They have been tumbled smooth by flowing methane, carried down from higher ground in some ancient flood and dropped where the current slowed. They sit in the little hollows the flow scoured out around them. Every detail of the scene is a textbook illustration of fluvial deposition, and every ingredient in it is wrong. Ice for stone, methane for water, and the same picture at the end. The 138th fact is that the mission very nearly lost half its data through a single small oversight. Huygens transmitted on 2 separate radio channels for safety, but one receiver aboard Cassini was never commanded to switch on. The lost pictures can never be recovered, and their absence is still quietly felt. The error was discovered too late to fix. As a result, about half of the descent images, some 350 of them, were lost forever, along with the Doppler wind measurement. Radio astronomers on Earth saved the wind data by listening to the probe's faint carrier signal directly across 1 billion kilometers. An extraordinary rescue, improvised in advance. The 139th fact is that Huygens kept transmitting from the surface for at least 72 minutes, far longer than anyone required of it, until Cassini finally slipped below the horizon and could no longer hear. Radio telescopes on Earth continued to detect its carrier tone for more than 2 hours after that. The probe had been designed to survive perhaps 3 minutes on the ground. It gave more than an hour of steady, patient reporting from a world nobody had ever touched. And then, when its battery finally ran out, it went quiet. The 140th fact is that Huygens is still there tonight, sitting exactly where it came to rest, on that dark plain among the rounded ice pebbles. It is cold and silent and slowly gathering a fine dusting of organic snow from the sky, a millimeter of it every few thousand years. No one will ever visit it, and nothing there will ever move it again. Nothing will disturb it. There is no wind strong enough to move it, no water to corrode it, no life to touch it. It will sit there quietly for many millions of years, the loneliest object anyone has ever put down anywhere. The 141st fact is that almost everything we know about Titan came from a single spacecraft named Cassini, which spent 13 years in orbit around Saturn. It launched from Florida in October of 1997, took nearly 7 years to arrive, and slipped into orbit around the ringed planet on the 1st of July, 2004. It was enormous for a space probe, more than 6 meters tall and weighing over 5 tons with fuel, and it carried a dozen instruments and 1 small European lander. It was, by almost any measure, the most successful mission ever sent anywhere. The 142nd fact is that Cassini made 127 close flybys of Titan between 2004 and 2017. That is more visits than any spacecraft has ever made to any world other than the one it launched from. Some passes were designed for the radar, some for the infrared, and some simply for the pull of gravity. Each pass was carefully planned, aimed at a particular region at a particular altitude with a particular instrument leading. Some skimmed within 900 kilometers of the surface, brushing the very top of the atmosphere. Titan was not a stop on the tour. Titan was, in a very real sense, the whole reason for the tour. The 143rd fact is that Cassini used Titan itself as its engine, and could not have completed its mission without it. The spacecraft carried only a limited supply of fuel, nowhere near enough to move itself around the Saturn system for 13 years. Instead, every close pass by Titan bent its path, using the moon's gravity to change the shape and angle of the orbit. Titan was heavy enough to do real work. Navigators planned the whole grand tour around those encounters, one flyby feeding into the next. The mission was, quite literally, powered by the moon it came to study. The 144th fact is that the single instrument that finally defeated the haze was a radar, and it worked exactly the way a radar works on the Earth. It sent out radio pulses and listened for the echo. Each strip was narrow, and stitching them together occupied cartographers for the better part of a decade. Radio waves passed straight through the orange smog without noticing it at all, and bounced cleanly off the ground beneath. On each close pass, Cassini swept a long, narrow strip of Titan, building a picture line by line. The strips were stitched together over years into a map. After 3.5 centuries, we saw the ground, one thin ribbon at a time. The 145th fact is that even after 127 passes, only part of Titan has been mapped at good resolution. The radar covered close to half the surface in fine detail, and rather more at coarser scales, but there are still large regions of that moon that no one has ever seen properly. Whole territories the size of continents remain blank or blurred. For a world larger than Mercury, sitting in our own solar system, that is a remarkable thing to be able to say. There is still genuine unexplored ground out there, which is not true of very many places anymore. The 146th fact is that radar was not the only way through, for there are a few narrow colors of infrared light that slip past the haze almost untouched. Astronomers call them the methane windows, wavelengths where the gas happens not to absorb, and looking through them is like finding a few clear panes in a frosted door. Everything we knew of Titan's surface before the radar arrived came through those few clear colors. Cassini's infrared instruments used those windows constantly, and from Earth the great telescopes do the same. It was through such a window that Xanadu was first glimpsed. The moon is not sealed after all. It simply requires knowing exactly where to look. The 147th fact is that in July of 2006, Cassini's radar swept across Titan's north polar region and found dozens of dark patches. Sharply edged and utterly smooth, the scientists on duty knew immediately what they were looking at. Those were lakes. Titan had standing liquid on its surface, and there was no other reasonable reading of the data. It was one of the great moments in the history of planetary exploration, and it happened quietly on a Tuesday on a computer screen in a room in California, a second world with shorelines found in an afternoon. The 148th fact is that the seas were confirmed beyond all doubt 3 years later, when Cassini caught the sun glinting off one of them. In July of 2009, an infrared instrument recorded a single brilliant point of reflected sunlight coming off the surface of a northern lake. The room was quiet for a moment or two, and then it was not quiet at all. Only a flat liquid surface can do that. Radar had shown smooth dark patches. The glint showed a mirror. It was the difference between strong evidence and proof, and it arrived in the form of one bright spark in an otherwise unremarkable image. The 149th fact is that Cassini arrived in the depths of Titan's northern winter and stayed long enough to see the northern summer arrive. Titan's seasons run about 7 Earth years each, so 13 years of observation covered nearly half a Titan year. When the spacecraft arrived, the entire North Polar region was in darkness and had been for years. Slowly the light returned, the polar hood dissolved, clouds began to gather over the seas, and the lakes emerged from shadow. Cassini watched a season change on another world, which no one had ever done before. The 150th fact is that Cassini measured Titan's shape with such precision that it was able to detect the whole moon flexing. As Titan moves along its slightly oval orbit, Saturn's pull rises and falls, and the moon stretches and relaxes in response. A solid moon of ice and rock simply cannot bend that far without breaking. By tracking tiny changes in the spacecraft's speed during close passes, navigators measured that flexing. It turned out to be about 10 meters, far more than a solid body of ice and rock could possibly manage. Titan bends too easily to be solid all the way through, and that single measurement changed everything. The 151st fact is that the same kind of careful tracking revealed something else strange, which is that Titan's outer shell does not seem to be firmly attached to its interior. Astronomers watching surface features found that the crust's rotation drifted slightly out of step over the years, speeding and slowing with the seasons as winds pushed against it. A shell rigidly connected to the core could not do that, but a shell of ice floating on a layer of liquid could slip a little, exactly as observed. The whole face of Titan is gently sliding, and the wind is moving it. The 152nd fact is that piecing together the map of Titan took the entire 13 years, and it was assembled the way a mosaic is assembled. Each flyby contributed a strip of radar, a patch of infrared, a handful of measurements. The finished globe is still incomplete and will remain so for a good many years yet. Cartographers fitted them together, corrected the overlaps, adjusted for the shifting crust, and slowly a globe emerged with coastlines and dune fields and mountains and named places. The map of Titan that exists today did not arrive in a moment. It was built up patiently, pass after pass, across more than a decade of quiet work. The 153rd fact is that Cassini's mission ended by choice rather than by failure, and it ended for Titan's sake. By 2017, the spacecraft was running low on fuel. Left to drift, it might eventually have struck Titan or Enceladus, and carried with it whatever hardy microbes from Earth had survived 20 years in space. Rather than risk contaminating a world that might hold chemistry of its own, the team chose to destroy the spacecraft deliberately. It was a decision made entirely out of respect for places we may not yet fully understand. The 154th fact is that on the 11th of September 2017, Cassini made its final pass by Titan, and the navigators called it the goodbye kiss. It was a distant encounter, and its purpose was not observation but geometry. Nothing about the maneuver was sentimental, and everybody involved felt it keenly anyway. Titan's gravity bent the spacecraft's orbit one last time, just enough to send it down into Saturn 4 days later. The moon that had steered the mission for 13 years gave it one final push. There is something almost ceremonial about it, whether anyone intended that or not. A last quiet exchange between old companions. The 155th fact is that Cassini entered Saturn's atmosphere on the 15th of September 2017, and transmitted for as long as it possibly could. It kept its antenna pointed at the Earth and its instruments running, sending back measurements of Saturn's upper air until the atmosphere finally overwhelmed its thrusters and it began to tumble. Then the signal stopped. It had traveled nearly 8 billion kilometers, returned more than 450,000 images, and worked flawlessly for 2 decades. It ended as it had lived, doing science right to the last second. The 156th fact is that Cassini was a genuinely international undertaking, built and flown by thousands of people across nearly 30 countries. The American Space Agency built the orbiter, the European agency built the lander, and the Italian agency built the great high-gain antenna that carried every word home. That Italian antenna carried every image and every measurement home across 1 billion kilometers of dark. More than 5,000 people worked on it over its lifetime. Children were born and grew up and became scientists themselves while the mission was still flying. It is one of the finest things our species has ever done together, and almost nobody argued about it. The 157th fact is that the data Cassini gathered is still being worked through today, years after the spacecraft itself ceased to exist. More than 600 gigabytes came home, and thousands of scientific papers have been written from it, with more appearing every year. Researchers still find new lakes in old radar strips, still refine the depths of the seas, still argue productively about the dunes. The mission is over and the discoveries are not. Somewhere tonight a graduate student is looking at a 20-year-old radar image and seeing something no one noticed before. The 158th fact is that everything the next mission to Titan will do depends entirely on the maps Cassini left behind. The landing region was chosen from Cassini radar. Nothing sent to Titan from now on will go anywhere that Cassini did not survey first. The scientific targets were identified in Cassini infrared. The winds the new craft will fly through were modeled from Cassini measurements. A spacecraft that no longer exists is still, in a very practical sense, guiding the exploration of that moon. It surveyed the ground so that others could walk on it. That is very often how this work goes. One generation mapping for the next. The 159th fact is that the name Cassini has now been attached to Saturn twice, 330 years apart. First to the Italian astronomer who sat in Paris with a long awkward telescope and picked out 4 of Saturn's moons one by one, and then to the spacecraft that spent 13 years among them. Giovanni Cassini never saw the surface of Titan and never could have. But the machine that carried his name did, and carried Huygens down to it besides. 2 17th-century observers quietly reunited aboard a single spacecraft 3 centuries later. The 160th fact is that for 13 years, something built by us was out there making slow, gentle, repeated passes by that orange moon, and now nothing is. Titan is unattended again. The last close look anyone had at that moon was the better part of a decade ago. The seas lie still, the rain falls in the north, the dunes creep eastward a grain at a time, and no instrument anywhere is watching. It has gone back to being what it was for all the ages before us, a quiet world going about its business alone in the dark. At least until the next machine arrives in the middle of the next decade. The 161st fact is that far beneath the frozen surface of Titan, roughly 100 kilometers down, there is almost certainly an ocean of liquid water. It lies underneath a thick shell of ice, sealed away from the cold sky, kept liquid by the warmth still leaking outward from the moon's rocky core and by the constant flexing of Saturn's tides. Nobody has seen it. Nobody has measured it directly. But the way Titan bends, and the way its crust slips, and the way its gravity shifts all point to the same conclusion. There is water down there, and a great deal of it. The 162nd fact is that the evidence for that buried ocean came from watching Titan breathe. Cassini's tracking showed the whole moon rising and falling by about 10 meters as it moved through its orbit, stretched by Saturn's changing pull. It is a strange thing to weigh an ocean you cannot see, by watching a whole world change shape. A body of solid ice and rock all the way through could flex perhaps a meter under that strain. 10 meters demands something soft in the middle, a layer that can slosh and give. Nothing else fits. That single number, measured across years of careful radio work, opened up an entire hidden ocean beneath the ice. The 163rd fact is that Titan's hidden ocean is probably very large, quite possibly holding more liquid water than every ocean on the Earth combined. A shell of water only 100 or 200 kilometers thick, wrapped around a globe 5,000 kilometers wide, contains an astonishing volume. Our own oceans, spread over a bigger world, are only a few kilometers deep on average, a thin film by comparison. So the moon with the methane seas on its face is also, quietly and invisibly, one of the great water worlds of the solar system, and none of it is anywhere near the surface. The 164th fact is that the water down there is probably not pure, and is very likely mixed with ammonia and dissolved salts. Ammonia acts as a kind of antifreeze, letting water stay liquid far below its ordinary freezing point, which helps explain how the ocean survives at all in such a cold place. Whatever is dissolved in that water has been dissolving there, undisturbed, for billions of years. Measurements of Titan's shape also hint at something dense and briny, perhaps rich in sulfur or sodium. It would be an unpleasant sea by any human standard, cold and bitter and lightless. But it would be liquid water, which is the substance every question about life begins with. The 165th fact is that beneath the ocean there is very likely another layer of ice, formed not by cold but by pressure. At the enormous depths inside Titan, water can be squeezed into dense crystalline forms that stay solid even when warm. Scientists call these high-pressure ices. If such a layer sits between the ocean and the rocky core, it may separate the water from the minerals below, and that matters because on the Earth the meeting of water and rock is where a great deal of interesting chemistry happens. Titan's ocean may be sealed above and below, an enormous sandwich of water and ice. The 166th fact is that Titan's atmosphere is an extraordinarily productive chemical factory, and it has been running without pause for billions of years. Sunlight and charged particles break apart the nitrogen and methane up there, and the fragments recombine into an enormous variety of organic compounds. Nothing in that process requires life or warmth or anything at all but sunlight and patience. Astronomers have detected hydrogen cyanide, acetylene, ethane, propane, benzene, and a long list of others, and the haze particles themselves contain molecules far more complicated than anything on that list. Titan makes organic chemistry the way a factory makes goods, continuously and in bulk, and then it rains it all onto the ground. The 167th fact is that when laboratories on Earth make artificial tholins and then add liquid water to them, interesting things happen rather quickly. Researchers have produced amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, and the bases that make up genetic molecules, simply by mixing Titan-like organic material with water and waiting. No special conditions are needed. The chemistry seems eager. That result is why so many scientists care so much about Titan, because the moon has been manufacturing exactly that material for 4 billion years, and has liquid water down below and occasionally at the surface as well. The 168th fact is that many scientists regard Titan as a preserved model of the early Earth, kept in cold storage. Our own planet, 4 billion years ago, is thought to have had a thick nitrogen atmosphere rich in methane, hazy and orange, before life filled it with oxygen and changed everything. What was erased here has been preserved out there, simply because nothing ever warmed up again. That world is entirely gone here. Every trace of it has been recycled and erased. But out at Saturn, where it is far too cold for anything to have moved on, a version of it has simply sat there, unchanged, a photograph of our own beginning taken from a great distance. The 169th fact is that some scientists have wondered seriously and carefully whether something could live in the methane seas themselves. Life as we know it needs a liquid to work in, and Titan has one. It would have to be built quite differently, with cell membranes made of nitrogen compounds rather than the fats we use, running on chemistry we have never observed. It is speculation, and everyone involved is careful to say so. But it is the kind of speculation worth having, because Titan is the only place we know of where the question can even be asked. The 170th fact is that one specific idea has been proposed and tested, involving acetylene and hydrogen. The suggestion is that an organism living in a Titan lake might consume acetylene from the surrounding liquid and breathe in hydrogen from the atmosphere, releasing methane as waste, and that this would leave a measurable signature. It remains very much a minority view, held carefully and argued honestly by those who hold it. Curiously, measurements did show hydrogen apparently flowing downward into the surface and acetylene curiously absent. Almost certainly there is an ordinary chemical explanation, but the observation was made and it has never been fully accounted for, which is exactly how good questions begin. The 171st fact is that there is one situation on Titan where organic chemistry and liquid water definitely meet, and it is worth understanding. When a large object strikes the moon, the impact melts the ice. And for a while, there is a pool of genuine liquid water sitting directly on a surface covered in accumulated organic material. Such a pool would stay liquid for centuries, perhaps far longer, insulated by the debris around it, before finally freezing solid. In that window, everything the laboratories reproduce could happen for real, slowly, and in the dark and completely unobserved. The 172nd fact is that Selk Crater is exactly such a place, and that is why it has been chosen as the destination of the next mission to Titan. It is young enough that the chemistry from its melt pool may still be preserved near the surface, and it sits at the edge of a great dune field. So a single site offers both the organic sands and the impact-worked ice. It also happens to sit in terrain flat enough and open enough for a spacecraft to land safely. Everything anyone would want to sample is within reach of one another there. Of all the ground on that enormous moon, that one crater is the place to go. The 173rd fact is that the mission going there is called Dragonfly, and it is not a rover but a flying machine. It is a rotorcraft, about the size of a small car, carried on 8 rotors arranged in 4 pairs, powered by a plutonium heat source that will keep it warm and charge its batteries between flights. It will not roll across the ground. It will lift off, fly, and land somewhere else entirely, again and again, for years. It is the most audacious thing anyone has ever proposed sending to another world, and it is already being built. The 174th fact is that Dragonfly is planned to launch in 2028 and to arrive at Titan in 2034. 6 years of coasting through the dark, and then an entry, a parachute, and a release, and the craft will fly itself down to the dunes of Shangri-La under its own rotors. The people who will fly it are already at work, and some of them are still students today. The wait is long, but it has always been long for the outer solar system. Somewhere a person reading this tonight will be 6 years older when it lands, and will very probably remember hearing about it first. The 175th fact is that flying on Titan is almost absurdly easy, and that is the whole reason Dragonfly is possible. The air is 4.5 times denser than ours, so a rotor bites into far more of it with every turn, and gravity is only 1/7 as strong, so there is far less weight to lift. Put those together and flight there is something like 30 times easier than it is here. A human being with wings strapped to their arms could genuinely fly on Titan. A helicopter can do it almost without trying. The 176th fact is that Dragonfly will not fly continuously but in careful hops, resting for long stretches between them. The plan calls for something like 30 flights over a mission lasting at least 3 Earth years, each flight covering up to 8 kilometers, with the craft landing, examining its surroundings, and slowly recharging before moving on. Between flights, it will simply sit in the dark, warming itself, listening to the wind. Altogether, it should travel well over 170 kilometers across the surface, far more than every Mars rover put together. It will explore Titan the way a dragonfly explores a pond, in short, bright journeys with long stillness between. The 177th fact is that Dragonfly will carry a drill, a mass spectrometer, a seismometer, a full weather station, and cameras. The drill will pull samples from beneath the surface. The spectrometer will identify what those samples are made of down to individual molecules. The seismometer will listen for tremors that could reveal the ocean below, and the weather instruments will record the first long-term climate data ever taken on another world. And the cameras will send back the first proper photographs of Titan's landscape in colors and detail we have never had. The 178th fact is that Dragonfly is not going to Titan to look for creatures, and the people building it are quite clear about that. It is going to study chemistry to find out how far the natural processes on that moon have carried the raw materials of life, and to see whether the steps we imagine happened here also happen there. That distinction matters a great deal, and it is what keeps the science honest. The question is not whether something lives on Titan. The question is whether life is easy or hard to start anywhere given time and the right ingredients. And Titan is the finest place we have to ask it. The 179th fact is that whatever Dragonfly finds, it will be the first machine to explore an entire world by flying over it. Small helicopters have flown elsewhere, briefly and near their landing sites, but nothing has ever used flight as its main way of getting about a planet. Dragonfly will cross dune fields, land in a crater, sample the ground in a dozen separate places, and see a range of terrain no rover could ever reach. It will do in 3 years what a wheeled vehicle could not do in 50, simply by rising into thick, cold, forgiving air. The 180th fact is that all of it, the buried ocean and the falling organics and the flying machine, comes down to one gentle question that no one can yet answer. Is what happened here ordinary, or was it a fluke? Titan is the closest thing we have to a second experiment, running under different conditions, with the same starting materials and 4 billion years to work with. Whatever the answer turns out to be, it will be very much worth the knowing. We will find out something either way, and there is a real comfort in knowing that the question is being asked at all, patiently and carefully and without any hurry. The 181st fact is that if you could stand on Titan, the very first thing you would notice is how light you had become. At 14% of Earth's gravity, a person of average build would weigh about as much as a large dog does here. Your arms would drift upward without effort. Lifting anything would feel faintly ridiculous. Walking would turn quickly into a slow-bounding gait, because an ordinary step would send you gently off the ground and set you down a good deal further along than you intended. The whole world would feel as though it had let go of you. The 182nd fact is that on Titan a human being could genuinely fly under their own muscle power, and this is not a metaphor or an exaggeration. Strap a modest pair of wings to your arms, and the combination of thick air and feeble gravity would let you take off and stay up with the effort of a brisk swim. Nobody has built the wings yet, but the physics has been checked more than once. Engineers have run the numbers carefully and they come out comfortably in favor. The only world in the solar system where you could flap your way into the sky is a frozen moon 900 million miles from here, and the sky there is orange. The 183rd fact is that the reason flight is so easy comes down to a simple multiplication of two advantages. Every wing beat pushes against air 4.5 times denser than ours, so it generates far more lift for the same motion. And that lift only has to support 1/7 of your usual weight. Multiply those together and the difficulty of flying drops by a factor of around 30. Birds here work at the very edge of what is possible. On Titan, a person in a heavy suit would be gliding lazily, without hurry, above the dunes, and would find it restful. The 184th fact is that the cold is what would actually kill you, and it would do it quickly, at 179 degrees below zero. The dense air of Titan draws heat out of anything warm at a tremendous rate, far faster than thin air or vacuum ever could. Cold like that is not really a temperature so much as a steady and patient subtraction. It is the same reason cold water is so much more dangerous than cold air here. Any suit for Titan would need to be less like a spacesuit and more like a deep-sea diving suit with a furnace inside it, insulated heavily and heated constantly. A warm little room worn on the body. The 185th fact is that you would not, however, need pressurizing, and that single fact makes Titan the friendliest surface in the solar system beyond our own. On the Moon or Mars or an asteroid, a tear in your suit means the air rushes out of you and you have seconds. On Titan, the air outside is already pushing slightly harder than the air inside would be. A tear would let cold in, which is very bad, but nothing would explode or boil or rush away. There is a real and comforting difference between freezing slowly and failing instantly. The 186th fact is that there is no free oxygen at all in Titan's air, so you would carry your own, and everything else about breathing there would be familiar. The gas around you is mostly nitrogen, exactly as it is here, and it would flow and swirl and behave the way air ought to. The gas outside would be breathable in every respect except the one that actually matters. Your breath would not steam because there is no water vapor to condense. But the mask on your face would feel ordinary. Of all the difficulties of standing on that moon, breathing would be the one solved most easily. Which is a genuinely odd thing to say. The 187th fact is that the light on Titan is a permanent, unchanging, softly glowing orange twilight, and it never gets brighter than that. Not at noon, not in summer, not anywhere on the moon. The haze spreads whatever sunlight arrives evenly across the whole sky and lets only 1,000th of it through. You would stand in a warm-colored gloom, roughly as bright as a heavily overcast evening here about 20 minutes after sunset. Bright enough to work, dim enough to feel like the end of a long day, always on a world where the day lasts 16 hours. The 188th fact is that under that amber light, every color you know would look wrong. The haze filters out blue and green almost entirely, so the whole landscape arrives in a narrow band of orange and brown and dull gold. Everything you would ever see there arrives in the same warm and narrow range. A blue object would look nearly black. A white one would look tan. Even the bright water ice of the hills reads as pale butterscotch. Photographs from Huygens had to be carefully corrected before anyone could interpret them. Titan is not merely orange in the sky. It is orange all the way down in everything you would ever look at. The 189th fact is that Titan would be, in almost every place and at almost every moment, profoundly silent. There are no animals, no machines, no rustling vegetation, no running water except in the rare places where methane flows. On most days, the wind at the surface is too weak to make any sound at all. You would hear your own breathing inside the suit, and the faint hum of whatever was keeping you warm, and beyond that a stillness more complete than anywhere on the earth. It is one of the quietest places that has ever existed. The 190th fact is that when a sound did occur on Titan, it would carry beautifully and travel far. Dense air is an excellent medium, and the low, flat, obstacle-free landscape offers little to absorb or scatter a noise. In a stillness that complete, even a single footstep would announce itself plainly. A voice would sound noticeably deeper than it does here, and it would reach across kilometers of still ground before fading. The rare rain, when it came, would make a soft, slow, heavy sound, drop after fat drop, patting against the dark sand. It would be the loudest thing for a very long way in every direction. The 191st fact is that everything on Titan falls slowly, and that gives the whole world a curious dreamlike quality. Drop a stone and it drifts down as though through water. Kick up dust and it hangs and settles gradually, taking many seconds to reach the ground. Jump, and you rise higher than you meant to and come down as gently as a feather. Nothing there arrives with force. Even the rain, even the parachute of a landing probe, even a mountain slope collapsing, would all move at that same soft, unhurried underwater pace. The 192nd fact is that you would never once see Saturn from the surface, and that may be the cruelest detail of the whole place. The great ringed planet hangs there permanently, 6 times wider in the sky than our full moon looks to us, unimaginably beautiful and completely hidden behind the haze. It is there, enormous and permanent and entirely out of sight all the time. You would stand beneath the most extraordinary sight in the solar system and see nothing at all but a uniform orange dome. To see Saturn from Titan, you would have to climb above the haze, some 600 kilometers of it. The 193rd fact is that a day on Titan unfolds so slowly that dawn is not a moment but a long, gradual change of mood. The sun, invisible behind the veil, takes about 8 of our days to cross from one horizon to the other, and 8 more to travel around beneath. The amber above you would brighten by imperceptible degrees across days, hold steady for days more, and then slowly deepen toward a darker bronze. You could sleep an entire night through and wake to find the light almost exactly as you left it. A world with all the time in the world. The 194th fact is that if you walked to the shore of one of Titan's great northern seas, you would find a coastline that behaves entirely unlike any coastline you have known. No surf. The tide would move it across many days, and even that would happen in silence. No sound of waves, no spray and no smell. Just a flat black surface meeting a dark beach with almost no boundary between them. The liquid so still and so free of ripples that you might not be certain where the shore ended until you stepped into it. And out beyond, kilometer after kilometer of perfect motionless dark, fading into the amber haze. The 195th fact is that Titan is so large that from a low hill you could see for a long way, and every direction would look much the same. Gentle dark plains, the long parallel ridges of dunes marching toward the horizon, the pale shoulders of ice hills catching what little light there is, and everywhere the soft haze softening the distance into nothing. There would be no landmarks and no shadows to judge distance by. The whole world would recede into a warm blur about a kilometer or 2 out, like looking across a valley in fog at dusk, forever. The 196th fact is that in all the strangeness of Titan, there is nothing whatever that is violent, and that is worth noticing. No lightning storms of any consequence. Nothing there has ever hurried, and nothing there has ever taken anyone by surprise. No hurricanes tearing at the ground. No volcanoes throwing fire. No earthquakes to speak of. No radiation at the surface because the thick atmosphere absorbs it all. It is a cold place and a lethal one for anything unprotected, but it is not a hostile place in the way that Venus or Jupiter are hostile. Titan simply is, quietly, going about its business, and it has never once done anything sudden. The 197th fact is that there is a particular kind of comfort in knowing that a world so like our own, in shape and in habit, has been going through its motions all this time entirely without us. The rain has been falling on Titan since long before anyone lived to name it. The dunes have been creeping eastward for millions of years with no one to walk between them. The seas have lain still and black through every hour of human history. None of it needed watching. None of it needed us at all. And it went on being lovely anyway. The 198th fact is that nothing at all is being asked of you tonight, and nothing needs to be settled before you sleep. Titan will go on raining whether you are awake or not. Kraken Mare will hold its slow tide, and the haze will drift down through the amber gloom, and the ice hills will stand exactly where they have stood, through every hour of your rest and every hour after it. Let your shoulders soften now. Let your hands unclose. There is nothing left to carry, and the night will hold you without any effort at all. The 199th fact is that as your thoughts grow soft and loose, you might let yourself drift outward once more, up through the roof and the clouds and the cold, clear air, out across the long dark between the planets, until a great ringed world rises quietly ahead of you, and beside it, that small orange moon, glowing faintly in the deep. Come down through the haze without any hurry. Feel the thick air catch you and lower you gently to a still black shore. There is no cold there in a dreaming mind, only quiet and warm amber light. The 200th fact is that long after this night has passed, and long after all our nights have passed, the rain will still be falling on Titan, drop after slow soft drop, into seas that have never once been disturbed, under a sky that has never shown a single star, and it will go on patiently, whether anyone is there to see it or not, exactly as it is doing now while you lie here in the dark and let the day dissolve. So let the last of it go, and drift out to that quiet orange shore, and rest beside those still black waters. Rest now, sleep well, and thank you for drifting with me beyond the stars.